So, to all of you that are trying to use Xamarin Studio on a Mac and are trying to get MVVM cross to work and have struggled with getting NuGet to work or NuGet added, here is a video that will follow through Stuart Lodge's first N+0 tutorial that will get us to the same point by working around the NuGet and working around with MVVM cross. First thing you need to do is go to Stuart's MVVM cross binaries. We find that at github/slodge/MVVM cross -binaries. In our case, we're wanting the XS iOS Mac, so we just go ahead and hit the zip file to download them. I already have them in my downloads, and so once we have them, that's what we're going to be needing, is that file from our downloads. So I'm going to start this right from the beginning. There's probably a shorter way to do it. NuGet tends to do all of this for you in Visual Studio, but like I say, couldn't get it running. So I'm going to come to New, C++, C# portable library. I'm going to call it first demo.core for the name, and the solution will be first demo. Portable library, this is running Xamarin Studio 4.0.4, so it is the latest version as to date. We can go ahead and select that, and then like Stuart has in his N+0 tutorial, we don't need the class file, so we can go ahead and remove that. We do need these, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a folder for our view models. So we create a view models folder. Once we've created our view models folder, we need to bring in our references, and in this case we'll go to references, right click, go to edit references, net assemblies, our downloads directory. Here's our XS iOS Mac, debug, MVX cross. Because we're dealing with the core, we're wanting the portable. The portable that I found we need are the cross core, the MVM cross localization, the MVM cross DLL are the three that we need here for the core that I found. We don't need the system core, system, or system XML. We just need the three cross core and MVVM cross and MVVM cross localization. Once we've got to that, we can then need to add a new file. In this case it's an empty class app. So here we have our app. We're not using system, we're using serious.crosscore.ioc. This is our first demo.core app. Instantiates MVVM cross view models MVMX application, and then we need to override void initialize and simply create creatable types ending with service as interfaces, register a lazy singleton, and then register app start with view models first view model. This should be in red because we don't have that yet. So from here, if we go create our first view model, so we add new file, again empty class, In this case, first view model. Again, our first view model is bringing in serious MVVM cross view models core.viewModels we need to add. Our view models brings in an MVX view model. Now, like I say, I'm copying Stuart's N+0, and Stuart's been a great help for this. So this is, you basically can, if you follow Stuart's tutorial on N+0, you'll see that this is the same type of deal. So we go ahead, create a private string first name, create a public string first name. Our get returns first name. Our set sets first name to value. We're going to raise property changes on first name, raise property changes on full name. Same that we have for full name, we need to have for last name. And then finally, for our full name, we don't need the set, and we're simply going to return string format first parameter, last parameter, where our first parameter is first name followed by last name. Return that, and we don't need the constructor for view model. If we go back now to app, we see that it's resolved, and that gives us our app. The next thing we need to do in core, again, go ahead, add a new file. In this case, add an empty file, and the file is packages.config. Like I say, this is all done for us if we use Hot Tuner. I couldn't get Hot Tuner to work. And then we're simply going to create a packages group. Packages group is going to have a package, ID is mvvm cross.hottuner.crosscall. And the starter pack. So basically our packages config is just an XML file with a single packages group with two packages. The first ID is mmv cross hot tuner cross core. The second one is mvvm cross hot tuner starter pack. It was 3.04 from what I could see, and the target framework was portable -Windows plus Net45 plus Mono Android 16 plus Mono Touch 40 plus SL40 plus WP71. Same applies with the starter pack from what I could see. And so that goes ahead and creates that off. We go ahead, we should be able to build the core. Full name if we spell it correctly. Rebuild the core and we have 0 errors. So that goes ahead and creates what we need for the core. Primarily just we need the view models directory to create our first view model. We need to create the apps class and the packages.config file, and all that we're bringing into here are the three serious, the cross core, the mmv cross, and the mmv cross localization. From what I could see, that worked for my one. If you really need help on the MVX cross stuff, I really suggest you get hold of Stuart. He was a great help for me. So that creates our core. So from our core we then need to create our new thing. I'm just going to do a Droid one. So I'm coming to Android honey ice cream sandwich, and it's going to be first demo.droid. Go ahead and create that. Now again, creates a main activity. We don't need this main activity, so we're going to remove it. Again, there's a couple of files that we need to create as well. So again, the first one we need to create again is that packages config. So I'm now simply going to take my packages config from my core, copy it to my packages config for the Droid. Under resources, under values, we need to create a file, new file. It's an XML file, and the XML file was mvx binding attributes. And simply within the MVM binding attribute we need to create a resources. Within the resources, the first one is a declare stylable with a name of mvx binding, and the mvx binding has two fields, an attribute where the name is mvx bind, where the format is a string, and we also then have an mvx lang, which the format is a string as well. I'd go ahead and just copy these ones because we're going to need to create another two stylables. The next stylable has an mvx control, and instead of bind has template. The next one we have is an mvx list view, which has an item template and then a drop down item template. Both of those are string types. And then lastly an MVM binding tag unique, which has an MVX source. And then lastly in here we have an item type of ID. Sorry, this is the MVX binding tag unique. This one up here is an image view. So that was an MVX binding with MVX bind, MVX lang, an MVX control with an MVX template, an MVX list view which has an MVX item template and an MVX drop down item template, an MVX image view which has an MVX source. Those are all declarable styles. And then lastly an item type ID of MVX binding tag unique. So that's the MVX attributes file that we need. The next file that we have to go ahead and create is the setup file. So again, we go to Droid, add new file, Android class, and it's simply called setup. We don't need any of the ones that they come in here, so I'm just going to wipe it all out using Android content, using Sirius MVVM I guess before we go any further MVM cross, let's go back and do our references again. Again, like I say, Stuart's tutorial goes and uses NuGet to get it. We're going to go to our downloads directory, our binary masters, binary debug, MVX cross. In this case we're in Droid. Being in Droid, the ones I found that were needed were the MVX cross droid and the MVX cross DLL, the cross binding droid and the cross binding. Again, the localization. Scroll on down to the bottom. We need our MVX cross, system net, system Windows, MVX cross droid. Those are what we need there. So if we look here, we should have our MVX, our cross core droid, our MVVM cross binding, MVVM cross binding droid, MVVM cross droid, MVVM cross localization, system.net and system.windows. All of those came from the binaries that we downloaded. Remember, that was from GitHub, slodge MVVM cross binaries. And then what was there, which we keep, is the mono.android, the system core, the system XML. We also then need to come to packages here and add the system MVOKL link. Now the next one that we need here as well is the one that I tried to get in as well, but I couldn't get it in through Xamarin, so drop to a command shell. I found that easier. Command shell, if I go to my first demo, I'm in my first demo droid. I'm needing to edit the first demo CS project file. Here we can see are all the references that we've just added in there. We need to, inside here, add an item group. Oops, and I don't have now the shortcut to that item group. So let me As I say, I got it all off of Stuart's, hacking around on Stuart's tutorial. We need to bring in our first core project, which is these lines here. So we need to add an item group. The item group has a project reference include, which is our first demo.core. It's our core that we created, and we're reading the first cores.cs proj file as well. The name is first.core. That's what the project reference is. And so that creates this item group that needs to go in here. Having created that item group, we simply save the project file. And then if we come back to references, it's added the first core in here. Yes, it is red because it comes up with this incompatible target. That's not going to stop us from what we're doing. So that creates the references that we needed for the droid package. So again, it was the cross-core droid, MVS cross binding droid, MVM cross droid, cross localization, system net, system windows. We all got that from the binaries. And then it's this, if there's another way to get this in, I had to go through the CS proj file to add the core into it. Now we can come back to our setup. You can see we've lost the red using Sirius MVVM cross view models. Our namespace is our first demo droid. We have a public class setup. That's an Android setup. Takes a context, application context. We simply call the base constructor. Setting that up there too. Platform singular. Sorry for my typing. So we still got 0 errors there. That's what sets that up. So that sets our setup file. The next one we need within droid, add new file class, again, is a splash screen. Splash screens, we need Android's app using Sirius MVVM cross droid views. Activity label first demo main launcher equals true, icon equals app drawable icon. Splash screen is an MVX splash screen activity. and we simply need public, the constructor that calls the base with a resource layout splash screen. Again, we haven't got our splash screen yet. We'll get that in a minute. So we'll do that. We go to resources, layout. We don't need main, so we can go ahead and remove main. We do need our splash screen, so add new file, layout, splash screen. It'll create just a blank generic splash screen. That's fine, that's all we need there. Once we've got that saved, we lose the error on this one here. Now the next thing we need to do with regards to the droid is create a folder for our views. So we create a views folder. Inside the views folder, we're going to go ahead, add a new file, which is a class, which is our first view. Sorry, that's Android activity, which is our first view. Using an Android activity, again, we don't need the system. We do need the app and the OS. We need Sirius's mvvmcross.droid.views. Change the namespace to first demo droid views. We can go ahead and leave the label, change the activity to an MVX activity, and set content view resource layout first view. So if we come back to layout, add new file, Android layout. This will be first view. Again, I'm going to drop directly to the XML. We need to close off the linear layout correctly so we can put objects within it. And then again, following Stuart's N00 tutorial, we need an edit text. The edit text has a text size 40 dp layout to fill the parent, height to wrap content, and then this is where we need to add the magic for MVX cross, MVX bind to the text field first name. And in order to do that, we need to come up to the linear layout, xlmns local http schemas.android apk /res first demo.droid. So that creates our first edit text, which binds to our first name. We then need an edit text to bind to our last name, and finally a text view which binds to our full name. So we have our first name, last name, full name. Those, if you remember correctly, is what we created with our first view model. Our first name, last name, full name. But first two are edit texts, the last one is a text view. That creates our first view. If we come to our first view class calls our resource layout first view. We require a splash screen, which can just be blank. Splash screen is simply just a startup splash screen labeled first demo main launcher true, which calls splash screen. And setup simply overrides the create app with first demo core.app, and so that goes ahead and creates the files that we need for Droid. So again, just quickly to overwrap, first core, we needed our references, the three MVX cross references. We needed a view models directory we had to create with our first view model. We had to create the apps class and the packages.config. Again, apps class simply was our first demo core class app, creatable types, ending with service, as interfaces, register as lazy singleton, register app start view models first view model, and our packages config had our hot tune across core and our starter pack. That finished off our core, which, if you remember, our core compiled. Our first demo droid, our references, we needed the cross core and cross core droid, the MMVX cross binding and binding droid, cross droid, cross localization, system net, system windows. We had to get first demo core to link. In order for me to get first demo core to link, I simply edited the CS project file. The CS project file by simply adding the item group project reference include first core.cs project files with the name of first core, and then we left, which it automatically created for us, the mono droid system core, system XML, and we had to go back and also add the system XML link. Once we had those, we could leave the layout. We deleted the main, but we kept the layout directory. We created the first view layout, which has the first name, last name, and full name. We created the splash screen layout, which is simply just a blank linear layout. Under values, we needed to create the MVX binding attributes. The MVX binding attributes was a resources with 4 declarable styles and 1 item type. We then needed to create a views directory. The views directory created our first view, and then we needed a packages config, which was the same packages config we saw from the core, a setup class, and a splash screen class. If we've got all of that right, if I go ahead and rebuild the core should rebuild with no errors. If I now go ahead and rebuild Droid, error on the splash screen. Again, it builds with no errors, and then so if we now go ahead and we now start debugging, I have the N+1 running on the emulator. So if I have that, I have the emulator running here. If we wait for a second, it does take a while for it to install the runtime libraries and the package files that it needs. Once it's finished running across here, installing the platform framework, we should end up with the same tutorial that Stuart had done using Visual Studio. This is done entirely in Xamarin Studio on a Mac without using NuGet if NuGet causes problems. Android minimum version not supported on device. Android build applications. target 2.2. Go ahead and rebuild the demo. Maybe it doesn't want to go as far back as 2.2. No errors, that's what we want. On the N+1. I'll shut down the N+1 emulator, start debugging. I'm going to use my tablet one. The tablet has Jelly Bean, I believe. It's not going to take a while for it to get back up started. This does take a while to get the emulators up and running. It's one of the reasons I prefer developing straight to a device. I apologize for the delay. So if we go ahead and again start debugging, this time use the tablet emulator. It takes a while to install everything. Minimum Android version not supported by device. Target framework. Bring our target framework back down. Rebuild the droid. Start debugging item on the emulator. Installing the application on the device. Fast dev created failed. Deployment completed, plugging it in. First demo, this is the splash screen. And we've hit an error.